benefit of people who'd like to see it later but couldn't be here tonight. But the Q&A section of the session is not recorded. That's my understanding. Look, thanks so much for joining us, because this is our opportunity to celebrate the value and the quality of regional and rural and community journalism, and to hear some good news to brighten the gloom of this particular media landscape now under enormous pressure with the closure of many local newspapers and the loss of many jobs. And of course, many communities are going to be deprived of a valuable source of local news and information. Some of you with us tonight, I think, are going through a very hard time, or even an uncertain time, just not quite knowing what the future of your jobs may be. So we're very aware of that. And look, so to our subject tonight, which we do hope is going to shine a light on the quality of rural and the great importance of rural and regional and community journalism. For the fourth year running, Women in Media Australia, in partnership with the National Press Club of Australia, is calling for entries for the country's preeminent award for up-and-coming regional reporters. You know, I don't think many of us, or a lot of us in the cities, realise the vast distances that some of our women have to cover to go and get the stories, to meet the people, to keep in touch with everybody. Vast areas of our country. It's quite an extraordinary situation to find yourselves in. Now you'll hear from three of us this evening, three of us with first-hand knowledge of this marvellous award. Emma Macdonald, convenor of Women in Media in Canberra and the creator of this award. Emma, where are you? Give us a wave, I can't see you. And Emily Jane Smith, now working at SBS Dateline and a winner of this award, 2018, I think. Emily, lovely to have you here. When she won the award, Emily was reporting from the Kimberley. And I'm Caroline Jones, co-patron of Women in Media with a special interest in rural and regional media. I began my working life, actually, in regional media, mad as it sounds. That was in Canberra in the 1960s. I know it sounds impossible, but working at the ABC in Canberra, which was then very much a regional radio broadcaster, reporting on the district and just beginning its television service. So I was there for a few years, then came to Sydney and had some years on This Day Tonight and 9 years on Four Corners. And I spent my last 20 working years with the ABC's wonderful Australian Story program. But the connection is family too. My grandfather, the son of a convict, was the first editor of some of the first newspapers in northwest New South Wales. The Werris Creek Express, the Murrurundi Times, the Corindi Advocate. Grandfather was involved in just about every activity in the district, from the first hospital committee and the show committee in Corindi and the water scheme and the Bushman's Carnival in Murrurundi. In print with his crusading editorials, he was a rip-roaring advocate for the district, the welfare of his district. And my mother wrote for the Corindi Advocate, so look, I've had ink in the blood and I don't think I was ever going to escape being a journalist. Since 2013, I've been co-patron of Women in Media, and in order to frame our award launch tonight, I thought I would just tell you briefly who we are, because I think some of you have joined us tonight. Might wonder, well, who are they, Women in Media? I'm sure you'd be familiar with the famous quote from the former Secretary of State in the Clinton administration, Dr. Madeleine Albright, when she said, there's a special place in hell for women who don't help other women. Marvellous. Well, we've turned that around and we say there's a special place in heaven for women who do help other women. So that's what we're about. We're a voluntary mentoring and networking group now established in all states and territories for the support, encouragement, professional development and career advancement of women in all branches of media. And I invite you to meet us on our website if you haven't already done so, womeninmedia.com.au. And I'm constantly grateful for the generosity of the women who give their time to be on the committees in the various states and territories. It's a big commitment, and All of you are busy women, and I think you're absolutely marvellous to give your time and your effort and your imagination for the benefit of other women. Well, our story began in 2005 in Western Australia when a senior News Corp journalist, Victoria Laurie, gathered a few colleagues together to meet regularly for their mutual interest. It proved to be very welcome and it prospered with the support of the Journalists' Union, the MEAA, originally the AJA, of course, back in my young day. WA WiM's activities, Women in Media, we call ourselves WiM, is the conduct of masterclasses on issues of vital importance to women in media. And as founder, Vicky Laurie is co-patron of the National Women in Media. So the West Australians are our pioneers. It wasn't until 2013 that we got going in New South Wales or in the other states. The instigator in New South Wales was Tracy Spicer AM, with the support of Marcus Strong, who was not then, but who is now Federal President Media of the union, our union, the MEAA. Soon the other states and territories formed their own Women in Media groups, running mentoring programs and regular events for networking and professional development. In the last 2 years, a new federal law relating to the financial conduct of a union necessitated us separating very amicably from MEA, the Media, Entertainment and Arts Alliance. And Women in Media had to become an independent company, which we have, while still remaining allied with the aims and objectives of the union. Now, smaller local chapters of Women in Media are forming around the country: Alice Springs, Townsville, Mackay, Albury, we hope. And the various state groups have developed their own creative activities. For instance, Queensland Women in Media organised the most brilliant annual conference for us, featuring speakers and panel discussions and workshops on every subject you can think of for our professional development and for keeping up with the latest innovation, of course. And the Canberra group, led by convenor Emma Macdonald, created the award, which is the subject of this discussion. Emma is a multi-award winning Canberra-based former press gallery journo who's now associate editor of online media platform Her Canberra. She's the Canberra convener of Women in Media, the co-founder of maternal health charity Send Hope, Not Flowers, and the creator of the Caroline Jones Women in Media Young Journalists Award for rural and regional journalists. Shortly, we'll also meet Emily Jane Smith, the 2018 winner of the award. But first, over to you, Emma, to find out about the aims and objectives of the award and how you dreamed it up and how it came into being.
Thank you, Caroline. And thanks, everyone, for joining us tonight. The award was one of those spur-of-the-moment, quick thoughts that just made a lot of sense, and I just pursued it. Running the Canberra group, I was always very aware that we're very, very lucky in Canberra. We've got the Press Gallery, we've got Parliament House, you know, we've got a wealth of journalistic talent here. And I just thought Canberra is often a closed shop when you're working elsewhere in the country. It's often, you know, sort of a career pinnacle to get yourself to Canberra. And I know how competitive those spots are in the Press Gallery. I always felt very lucky that, you know, I lived here and I had access to the gallery right from the start of my career. But I thought, you know, it would be wonderful to allow these talented up and coming rural and regional journalists a glimpse of life in Canberra, in the Press Gallery, in Canberra as a city. So I thought it would be great if we could run an award, pick out the best and the brightest, the most tenacious. And gosh, Caroline, haven't we just every year the award applicants get better and better and better? And I almost feel embarrassed. I just think at that age, I didn't have half that talent or tenacity. So I always whenever we judge each year, I always end up in tears. I get overwhelmed and overcome with, you know, how proud I am of the award and of the talented women that apply. So we have 4 judges for the award. They are Caroline Jones, who really does the lion's share of the work and really does a lot of sort of organisation and prepping of the award winners before they get sort of handed down the line. There's myself, there's Ginger Gorman, who's a social justice reporter and author of Troll Hunting, and there's Catherine Murphy, who is the political editor for The Guardian and who's also on the National Press Club board. We could not do this award without having the National Press Club as a partner. They help fund the cost of the prize. They fly the winner down to Canberra and put them up for a week. And we also provide a $2,500 professional learning fund that can be spent however the winner wants. Perhaps Emily can tell us what she's dedicated her money to. I know that Virginia, our last year's winner, has had 2 young children, now has 3 young children, and she actually just needed the space and time to write. And so she actually used her money to fund a nanny, which is a perfectly inspired way to use that funding. Whatever that money is best suited towards, the winner will know, and we trust the winner to spend it wisely. So the winner will come to Canberra for a week. We're hoping that this year's winner will be available in November. And they come down, they stay in a very groovy little hotel opposite the National Press Club, under the shadow of Parliament House. And then they spend 4 or 5 days billeted out with various journalists in various newsrooms, including Catherine Murphy often takes the winner for a day, Shalila Medora from Triple J's The Hack. Ginger Gorman organised a freelancers lunch for Virginia last year to talk about, you know, if you're trying to pitch stories, what you can do in that respect. Carleen Minnie at the Canberra Times takes the winner for a day in the big newsroom of the Canberra Times, which is our local paper down here. And she's great in terms of, you know, fine-tuning skills in photography and, you know, expanding your horizons in that sense. We also have a National Press Club address. We've just locked in Claire Bowditch, who will come and give the address when the winner is down for that week. Hopefully, I think it's November the 18th, but we'll put it all out once we've locked everything in for sure. And the winner gets to sit on the main press table in the National Press Club and ask the first question, which is pretty darn scary. And Emily can perhaps talk to that a little bit more. And I guess the most important part of the prize is that the winner makes connections with some of the country's most generous, most big-hearted, most successful female journalists, and those connections, you know, can last forever and be quite life-changing. So we think it's a great award. We're always open to improving it or tweaking it or changing it, but so far it's going really well, and each year there's been an increasing number of applications, which is a really, really great sign. So Caroline, I might get you to introduce Emily and she can have a chat to us about how it came that she won.
Yes, I'd love to do that. Emily Jane Smith, winner of the award in 2018. Emily's working today on the marvellous SBS Dateline program, but she won our Young Journalist Award while reporting for the ABC on all platforms from remote areas in the Kimberley in northwest WA. Really, you know, her experiences up there, I know she should talk about them, but one thing that struck me when I was reading her entry was just imagine yourself on the dirt, 10 hours on the dirt road to Columbaroo. You lose your mobile phone service, there's no reception there, and you're probably going to camp out at night in a remote community while you're investigating issues of homelessness and education, and you know, it's quite a remarkable journalistic experience. I hope she's going to talk about it. So Em, congratulations again on your winning of the award for the quality of your reporting and photojournalism, and I think we'd love to hear from you about that transition from city life to one of the most remote areas in our country, and how that affected you, and something about the people whose stories you told, what it was like gathering stories in remote communities, whether you ever felt that the stories that you were producing were making any difference, you know, having any impact in places like Canberra or in any city where the big decisions are made, and providing a voice for people whose stories I think are so seldom aired in mainstream media, and what responsibility you felt to do that. So over to you.
Well, I just want to say it's been such an honour to be a recipient of this award, and it has given me sort of lifelong friends and mentorship, and also a lot of confidence as well, which as a rural reporter, I mean, I had confidence, but I'm not sure, you know, you always doubt the work that you're doing. And yeah, so when I got the job in Broome, I don't think I quite imagined the distances. I mean, the sheer, the Kimberley's sort of twice the size of Victoria, and being based in Broome, if you wanted to do a story about someone or an issue or something that was going on, it was often the decision of, okay, can I convince my boss to let me drive 8 hours and maybe camp or stay in a cheap place, or do I do it by phone? And it was often that having to really make sure that it was a good enough story, and also having enough stories from a particular place to, I guess, convince the ABC to, you know, invest resources in that. So I think that really, I guess, perhaps pushed the stories to what they could be, or the best that I could possibly do, I think, which I think probably made me really made me a better journalist than maybe perhaps I otherwise would have been. And that, yes, sometimes involved 10-hour car drives on roads without reception. And that particular story that Caroline was referring to, I was traveling to Columbaroo, which was actually longer than 10 hours. It was about 2 days, visiting communities along the way, and also 2 flat tires. I wasn't by myself on this trip.
Nightmare.
Yeah. And both times the jack that you lift up the car with didn't work either. So we had to flag down like grey nomads that were travelling while we were driving the ABC 4-wheel drive with the big ABC sticker. But we didn't seem that self-sufficient. But yeah, we travelled to a community, Columbaroo. Me, my colleague Erin, who's you know, extremely accomplished journalist, and very grateful to have that experience with her too. And it was that community which was where I did one of the stories that I entered into the award, which in fact I did remotely before actually physically going to the community. But just as an example of some of the work that I did there, I was sort of making contact continuously, as you do it as a regional journo, sort of, you know, calling people up, asking what was going on. And someone said that, you know, this woman had been homeless with her family, and homeless, you know, staying in an overcrowded house because her home had burnt down. And it was a government house, and it was, in that situation, the responsibility of the government to repair the home to make it livable. But for some sort of bureaucratic slip through the cracks reason, it hadn't been fixed for over a year. And after publishing that story, the house was fixed within a week. And I think that's an example, probably the best example of the stuff that regional journalism can achieve, or the biggest impact that it can achieve, because often perhaps the stories don't reach that story. I don't know if it got read by more than 5,000, 6,000 people, but it got read by the right people, I guess.
Yes.
Emily, can you tell us the other two
Sorry.
stories, the other two entries, so that people can get an idea of the breadth of stories that you decided? It would have been difficult to choose as well.
Yeah, so that was one of those stories. The other story was a story about a young woman who lost her child in a remote community. Her baby was 9 months old, and she had been to the local clinic about 3 times with her baby, who was sick with sort of cold and flu-like symptoms. She was turned away, but it was quickly evident that the child didn't have a cold but had meningitis. And because she was so remote, once they realised how sick the baby was, it was too late. So she was flown to Perth, but the baby had died. And I was lucky enough to actually meet, her name's Kajana, in this community, because I was doing another story about women's football. And I was just asking her, I was just having a chat to her. She was part of the team, and I was just like, while we're here, sometimes it can be difficult for us to, get out. But while we're here, is there anything else that is going on that you think's important for other people to know about? And she just told me what had happened. So she agreed to sit down and do an interview, and that was published online, radio, TV as well. And then the other story, sorry.
No, I was going to say, when you say, she sat down and gave me the interview, from my own experience of working with Indigenous people, that is quite remarkable, because I think very often Indigenous people feel that the media is interested in grim stories, stories of what's gone wrong and how the gap hasn't been closed and so on. But you did manage with your stories to gain the confidence or the trust of a number of people. And I think that was a great credit to you, because it's not that easy. And why should Indigenous people suddenly be open to someone who lobs in the community, and wants to get their stories? So it was one of the things about your work that we thought was very special.
Yeah, and I don't know how well I can answer that question. I think it really depends on the individual, the community, their experience with media. And I think with this particular, I can't speak to Kajana what really compelled her to speak to me. I really have a feeling that she was just waiting to tell her story. But I know the CEO of that particular community knew the importance or the impact that telling a story to the media can have, just in terms of enacting or motivating the government to actually do something, depending on what the story is. And also I was there to do a positive story, which may have, I guess, changed the impression, or maybe have, encouraged her to open up to me. But in saying that as well, I think I am a white woman that was lobbing up to these communities, and I think that is probably a discussion about how we need more diverse newsrooms as well, because while these people spoke to me, I'm sure a lot of people didn't. So yeah.
Yes.
And what was the third entry?
Oh, the third story. So the third story was it was about, so the ranger program in remote and regional Australia, all over Australia, is really popular. The Indigenous Ranger program. But it's particularly been male, like a man's sort of, I guess, job. But when I was in Broome, some of the remote communities were encouraging women to get involved. And I met this group of women Indigenous rangers who were really like loving this program, loving having opportunity and work where there often isn't. But unfortunately, the funding was getting cancelled by the government because of a political caveat. Tony Abbott had set up this Green Army fund, and when Malcolm Turnbull became Prime Minister, he stopped that program, and through some, and this group were just getting this Green Army program funding. So I did a story about that and this woman who had really benefited from this program and the opportunity that it gave her. And there wasn't any immediate impact from this story, but eventually I think the program got some state funding, or these women kept their jobs eventually, which is really great. Yeah. And those were the 3 stories.
And Emily, can we get you to tell us a little bit, and you can tell us warts and all, just because we made the award doesn't mean that we're not open to any feedback whatsoever. Yeah, sure. But first of all, tell us how you heard that you had won, and what it felt like, and also just tell us about what were some of the highlights and maybe some of the things that you weren't expecting from Canberra. Or
yeah, absolutely. Well, I remember I was in my bedroom and I got a call, and it was Caroline Jones. I was like, oh my God. And just, we start talking and we start talking about the award, and I just thought, oh, that's so nice. She's calling all of the people who entered and saying, I'm sorry, but you haven't won. But then she said, oh, you've won the award. And I was like, oh, it was just so amazing. And I got the opportunity to go to the conference on the Gold Coast and also to Canberra as well. And on the Gold Coast, I've met a lot of other great journalists like Ellie, who we went there together, which was really great. And the experience in Canberra was just it's a cliche, but it was a once in a lifetime opportunity to get flown from Broome to Canberra to spend a week at the press gallery. And in the press gallery, basically being able to spend a day at the Guardian with Shalila at Triple J, but also just everyone is so nice. I would walk into Channel 7 and they'd be like, oh yeah, come and check out when our next bulletin goes to air, and we'll show you how it works. You can do the auto cue, like stuff like that. And everyone was giving me their cards and, encouraging me to keep in touch, which was really incredible. But I think the most memorable thing was asking the question at the press club, which I was so bloody scared.
But you did it.
I did. I remember you, Caroline, being like, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. But yeah.
And have you kept, if you were down again, or, would you feel confident enough to keep up those channels of communication that you...
Yeah, absolutely. So I've sent occasional emails to the journalists that I have met. And yeah, absolutely. It's just kind of, it kind of took off that veil of, this is somewhere where I could be, which is really encouraging. Yeah.
Is it something, would you like to be in Canberra?
I'm not sure. I think, to be honest, my strengths probably lie more in getting out and telling more personal stories, which is something that you can do in the press gallery, but perhaps not as much as the opportunities that I have been afforded. But in saying that, I'd never say no to an opportunity as well. Yeah.
We had a lovely experience with our last year's winner, Virginia Tapscott, who is, as I said, is a freelancer. And at the Gold Coast conference, she met Michelle Gunn, who was then the Weekend Australian magazine editor, who's now the editor of the Australian. And she gave Virginia her card and said, pitch me some ideas. And I know that Caroline made sure that there was an adequate facilitation of communication between the two women. But a couple of weekends ago, I got a very excited text message from Virginia that she'd had a massive feature published in the Inquirer that was a direct result of the links that she made. And for a freelance journo in Narrabri to get that amount of space
wonderful.
Was a really, really big thing for her. So you just never know. You've got to be open to everything, don't you, Emily?
100%. Yeah. And I'm excited for this year's winner as well.
Yeah.
Especially now, something really positive.
Caroline, what are we looking for when we get the flood of entries?
Well, I was just looking for quality, I suppose. But I was actually blown away right from the very first year, because I feel that some of the journalism which is being written and, on all the platforms, produced on all the platforms, is some of the best journalism being written in Australia today. And I think we were also tremendously impressed, because as well as the stories that the young journalists send us, they send some sort of a submission about their approach to their journalism and what matters to them, and what difference they feel they might be making. And I think that's what I loved so much. So can I just quote just a few sentences from some of those submissions, without perhaps mentioning their names, but perhaps their areas? This young person said, it's vital to highlight neglected, marginalised voices in regional communities by trying to get them on the national agenda. I use my strength in listening to people and gaining their trust so they can open up and tell their story, even in difficult situations. She says, I also like reporting not only on problems, but on solutions too. And another wrote, I've discovered my capacity as a journalist to investigate not only our society's ills, but potential evidence-based remedies for them. I remember one beautiful one, Emma, do you recall? She told the story of a homeless person who, through a diagnosis and suffering from cancer, had become homeless. Well, this was one of those sort of people that you don't see. It's someone on the street who's begging, and it doesn't really register. But she wrote this for her local newspaper, a profile of this man. Who was he? What was his story? What was his background? What had happened to him? And the story resulted in him getting permanent government housing, and just helped him feel like a human being again. That sort of thing touched me very much. More than one journalist, I think, said that the job of a journalist is to connect people. Many of them say that they are very aware of a gap in understanding between city and country, and they felt it was their job to try and interpret each to the other. Even rather, what should we say, basic things like where, in fact, does the food come from? The milk doesn't come out of a carton on the, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
There's actually, we thought, Emma, a lot of strong investigative work done in the regions, subjects like poisoned waterways or lead in the playgrounds where the children are playing as a result of mining, land rendered useless by firefighting foam, huts that have been used for years by Indigenous people on the riverbank, removed for development. Well, that young journo, who broke the story of the appalling fish kill in the Darling River in far west New South Wales, and she followed it through like a terrier. followed it through and broadened it, you know, really showing the gaps and the faults in government water policy.
Yeah, and some of these journalists had spent months and months and months following. Yeah, we asked for tenacity and we were shown it in spades. Now, Emily, some people want to know, what was your question at the press club? And what did you ask?
Yeah, so it was Julie Imnan Grant, the e-safety commissioner, and it was about it was how the e-safety commission is addressing those who might be using internet, or young people who are using the internet for the first time in regional and remote areas, or who are having constant access to internet for the first time. Yeah.
One thing I was going to say that I was both impressed by and also looked for in the submissions was, I was blown away by the multi-platform entries and the journos that were, you know, doing the live radio crosses and taking their own photos and writing their own stories and doing videos and pieces to camera. And, you know, I just thought, when I was a young journo, you know, it was enough that I could just spell the lead correctly and get the basic facts down. Whereas I feel that, you know, the breadth of skills and talent that that our young regional and rural journalists have to have in order to survive is brilliant. We also had another question about someone saying, with subscription, with all the subscription requirements, where can some of these stories go? I guess that's a broader media question. Who's going to publish? Who's going to pay these journalists to do these stories? Yeah. Emily, what do you think? You're out there on the front line. You were there. What?
In terms of like newspaper subscriptions now,
well, yeah.
Ownership. Yeah, it's a really difficult space, and I just hope that locals and wider Australia just see the value in having an updated local news source and invest in getting a subscription to their local papers so they can employ their journalists. That's what I really, really hope.
We all hope that.
Yeah.
Should I quickly, we would love if anyone has any questions about the award or about, you know, opportunities for young journos or any feedback at all, just if you could just type it into the chat and I'll ask it out. But just in general terms, if you are going to submit an award, you need to submit a minimum of 1 and a maximum of 3 stories. They can be any choice, any topic. They can be one theme or completely different. We leave it up to you. We need a bio, and we need obviously the statement of application, which is where you can get creative and tell us, you know, a little bit about yourselves. Our wonderful Danny Cronin has created an internal portal that you go into and you submit your application that feels, I mean, I haven't gone right through to the end, but it all looks very schmick and very easy. The statement can't be much more than 500 words. So bear in mind that we had more than 60 entries last year. So with, you know, considering everyone might submit 3 features and then their statement, it can be a lot to read. So we love the short, sharp approach to catching our attention. Now, one thing that we would love applicants to be aware of is that with all the paywalls up, if you are submitting something that's been published behind a paywall, can you send us a PDF so that we actually have access? And if it's a broadcast piece, a YouTube link or something that's publicly available. So no drop boxes or things like that, because it gets a bit unwieldy. We're also all available to answer questions. You know, if anyone's not sure about what they should be doing or sending, you know, we're available to be there as a resource. So that can be helpful. Does anyone have any questions about the award, whether it's right for them,